The war between Zeus and the Titan Cronus, known as the Titanomachy, was waged to decide who would become the supreme ruler of the heavens and the earth. Having escaped the fate of his siblings who were consumed by Cronus upon their birth, Zeus would return to free them from his father's stomach, and so began the epic conflict between the Olympians and the Titans. Whilst Cronus had a fearsome army of fellow Titans led by the mighty Titan Atlas, Zeus was backed by the might of his siblings Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, and Demeter. However, these weren't the only allies that Zeus would come to recruit. Interestingly, one of his most pivotal allies was in fact a Titan himself, one who would be known as Prometheus. Prometheus was the son of the Titan Iapetus and the Oceanid Clymene. He was one of 4 brothers who were Epimetheus, Atlas, and Menoetius. During the war with Zeus, Atlas and Menoetius sided with Cronus, and would wage war upon the Olympians in vain. The other 2 brothers in Epimetheus and Prometheus sided with Zeus during the battle, though their roles in the conflict are never actually specified. It's probable that Prometheus aided Zeus by use of his great wisdom and intellect, and possibly helped Zeus understand the nature of the Titans, their strategies for battle, and how best he could counter them. It is mostly unknown as to why Prometheus didn't side with his own kind, much as it is unknown as to why Atlas was so hellbent on leading the army against Zeus. One idea is that Prometheus was irked that the Titans did not listen to him when it came to strategy, and that they were more inclined to fight with the brute strength of Atlas than the cunning of Prometheus. Prometheus, who realized that Zeus would win such a battle, decided to cut his losses and join Zeus so as to spare himself of the inevitable defeat. His brother Epimetheus joined him. Whilst we know little about the nature of Prometheus, he is thought to have been well-mannered, wise, and surely modest. He was well liked amongst the people, but none appeared to like him more than Zeus did. Grateful for both Prometheus's and Epimetheus's help in battle, Zeus rewarded the brothers with the duty of creating man and animals to populate the world with. Now Prometheus, whose name meant forethought, was already established as one of the wisest beings in existence, perhaps even more so than the gods themselves. But his brother Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought, was considerably less so, and was prone to impulsive decisions and an erratic nature. It's understood that before Prometheus had the chance to create man, Epimetheus had already given the best gifts to the animals of the world. The tiger received speed, the elephant received size, the gorilla received strength, and the birds received flight. Epimetheus ensured that the animals received wings, shells, fangs, claws, hooves, pretty much everything that would make them physically superior to man in some way. Realizing the error of his rashness too late, as he was often prone to do, he turned to his brother for help. Prometheus now had the difficult task of making man superior, though without being able to resort to the incredible gifts that had already been given to the animals. Therefore he fashioned man to walk upright like the gods, built them in the shape and the form of the gods, and proceeded to give them fire. In her book Mythology, The Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes, Edith Hamilton notes, "And now though feeble and short-lived, mankind has flaming fire, and therefrom learns many crafts." It just goes to show how much investment that Prometheus put into man, and how much this little project meant to him. Given that Epimetheus had already given, arguably, the best traits to the animals, Prometheus was determined to give man a fighting chance. It also shows us how highly he thought of man, in that he created man in the image of the gods, those that were graceful, beautiful, and beyond powerful. Evidently, Prometheus wanted his mankind to be just like the gods, to rule the earth as the gods themselves ruled the heavens. The resourcefulness of Prometheus also shines through here, as he's able to think outside of the box, and give man something that his brother had not given to the animals, that being fire. You might say that Prometheus was so in favour of man's survival that he risks giving them fire in the first place, even though he understood its potency and likely was aware of how Zeus would react to this. In another version of the creation of man in Greek mythology, it is the gods who create mankind in a sort of trial and error effort, whereby a race of gold, silver, brass and iron men were created as sort of an experiment. In both cases though, one fact is agreed upon. These race of men were exactly that, a race of men. Women were not a part of the equation and would only come about later after Zeus had been deceived. In some versions, Zeus grew angry that Prometheus had given man fire, for he feared that with fire, mankind would be able to control one of the most destructive elements. Not only would they be able to warm themselves and cook their own food, but they would also be able to make their own weapons and wage war wherever they sought. Zeus believed that fire was too much of a gift for man to wield, and furthermore believed that with fire, man would have no need of the gods. He intended to keep man subservient to them, helpless in their striving to survive, and at total mercy of those who ruled above them. Evidently, Zeus and Prometheus' vision for man differed greatly, and it can be said that Prometheus probably wouldn't have minded his own creations rising up and challenging the gods with the fire he'd given them. In fact, he probably might have been tempted to encourage it, given that he seemed eager for humanity to grow, and therefore possibly outgrow the gods themselves. The fact that he gives them fire is proof of this enough, for as stated, fire gives man the ability to not only care for themselves, but also create art and build weapons. In this, fire becomes more than just a resource for man to use, but more so a metaphor for Prometheus literally giving man the keys to the kingdom. In another version of this tale, man already had fire, an element they presumably discovered on their own. But they would find themselves stripped of such a comfort when Prometheus would trick Zeus in their favour. We are told that at some point, Zeus gave Prometheus the task of deciding how his mortal creations would make sacrifices to him and the other gods. It would become known as the trick at Mycone, and is primarily one of the reasons why Prometheus earns his moniker as the Trickster Titan. Mycone is thought to have been the ancient Greek city known as Sicyon, and is the site of which this event took place. Sensing an opportunity to give his creations an upper hand over the gods, Prometheus hatched up an idea. He killed an ox and divided the creature in half. In one part, he placed the meat of the ox under the unappealing flesh of the ox's stomach. In the second part, he placed the bones of the ox under a thick layer of fat. After presenting these two portions to Zeus, Zeus decided that the thick layer of fat was surely the better choice. After realizing that the portion he had chosen contained only bones, he was outraged that he had been tricked. Disgruntled by this deception, Zeus took fire away from man. Interestingly, Zeus's choice of the bones would therefore dictate how mortals would make their offers to the gods, allowing them to keep the meat of the animals for themselves and only needing to sacrifice the bones and the fat. What's even more interesting about this is that Zeus never tries to contest Prometheus, despite having been tricked. He accepts the decision, and in this moment we see Prometheus as not just a trickster, but also a hero. He puts his own well-being on the line in order to ensure the survival of his creation, furthermore showing us how much he loves and adores man, that he is willing to deceive even Zeus, so that man may eat well. Some might say that Prometheus certainly takes on the role of a father, in that he goes above and beyond in order to ensure that his children do not starve. When Zeus took the fire away from man, Prometheus naturally felt responsible for mankind, and it pained him to see man now totally lost in the darkness, unable to cook their food without fire, and unable to keep themselves warm. Seeking to aid his beloved creation, Prometheus snuck into the workshop of Hephaestus and Athena, where he was able to steal the fire back, and bring it safely back to man. This would see man thrive again once more, where they would establish themselves as the dominant species and rule the natural order of the earth. It was Prometheus's risk of bringing fire back to man that would serve as a catalyst for the growth of the human species. In most legends, Prometheus conceals the fire in a hollow fennel stalk in order to sneak it out of Olympus. In honor of his daring move, the Athenians created a race in which the runners of the same team would pass between them a flaming torch. The final runner of the winning team would have the honor of using the fire on the altar of Athena. It was these types of races that would become the very first relay races and mark the origin of the Olympic flame ceremony. When Zeus realized what had happened, however, you can imagine how enraged he was. Not only had Prometheus defied him in the first place by giving man fire, as well as having already been tricked by him to select the poorer sacrifice, Prometheus had now undermined his power by returning to man that which was taken. As if it needed to be said, consequences were coming. Zeus swore vengeance, and he took this vengeance in two parts, one part against mankind and one part against Prometheus. To spite mankind, Zeus created what was to be considered a great evil to men, a thing so sweet and beautiful to gaze upon in the likeness of a shy maiden. The gods adorned her with gold and silver, dressed her with a broidered veil, gave her blooming flowers, and placed a spectacular crown of great beauty upon her head. Because of the gifts they had given her, they named her Pandora, the gift of all. When this beautiful walking catastrophe had been created, both man and the gods beheld her with astonishment. From Pandora came the first woman, and the race of women thereafter. In a more famous legend, Pandora becomes the source of all misfortune for man, out of sheer curiosity. Amongst her gifts from the gods, she was given a box, which each had placed something harmful inside. There they forbade the woman never to open the box. With that, Zeus sent Pandora onto Epimetheus, who accepted her with great eagerness, considering her beauty. Prior to this, however, Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept anything from Zeus, for he had likely seen the father of gods plotting against them and mankind. But being known for his hindsight, Epimetheus did not heed his brother's warning. Pandora, who had grown curious as to what was in the box that the gods had given her, eventually opened it, despite being told not to. Upon doing this, out flew unimaginable plagues and disasters upon the world. From sorrow and mischief to tragedy and pain, great terrors were unleashed until Pandora slammed the box shut. She was too late, however, for all the evils had escaped the box. Only one element remained inside the box, however: hope. Hope was the only good thing that had been stuffed in amongst the evils, and you might say that it remains to this day our greatest comfort when tragedy or horror falls upon us. Of course, that covered man's punishment, and man soon learned after that tricking and defying Zeus was not something that one could get away with. Unfortunately, Prometheus soon learned it too. Zeus had Prometheus seized and taken to the Caucasus, a region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, by his minions' strength and violence. Here Prometheus was chained and bound to a mountainside. Hesiod tells us in the Theogony that Prometheus was told, "Forever shall the intolerable present grind you down, and he who will release you is not born. Such fruit you reap for your man-loving ways. A god yourself, you did not dread God's anger, but gave to mortals honour not their due. And therefore you must guard this joyless rock. No rest, no sleep, no moment's respite. Groan shall your speech be, lamentation your only words." Not only was Prometheus's binding torture enough, but Zeus sent an even more gruesome means to hurt his former ally. He sent an eagle to prey upon Prometheus, an eagle that every day would tear apart the Titan's liver, a liver which would regenerate overnight, allowing for the torment to continue indefinitely. However, there may have been more than one reason for this treatment of Prometheus, and that was because apparently Prometheus was guarding a secret that would be detrimental to Zeus. It's understood that Zeus would hear from fate that one day a son would be born to him that would dethrone him, much as he had done to his father in Cronus. However, only Prometheus knew the identity of the mother of this child, and he was refusing to spill the beans. As Prometheus remained bound in agony, Zeus would from time to time send his messenger Hermes in an attempt to get Prometheus to disclose the identity of the child's mother, so that he could make sure he didn't sleep with her. But Prometheus remained tight-lipped. Despite the promise of more hardships if he did not speak, Prometheus never actually relinquished the information. According to Hesiod, he told Hermes that, "There is no force which can compel my speech, so let Zeus hurl his blazing bolts, and with the white wings of the snow, with thunder and with earthquake, confound the reeling world. None of all this will bend my will." After many generations, we learn that Prometheus was released, but why or how is not necessarily clear. There exists a story about a centaur named Chiron, who, though immortal, was willing to die for Prometheus, and that he was allowed to do so. Zeus appeared to accept Chiron as a substitute, but we are never told why he was willing to let Prometheus off the hook all of a sudden. Another version exists that the great hero Heracles stumbled upon Prometheus, and that he killed the eagle with an arrow before freeing the Titan from his bonds. In any case, it would appear that Prometheus and Zeus reconciled, and that thereafter, Prometheus would come to be celebrated as a figure that did not yield. To the ancient Greeks, he would become a symbol of rebellion against both the injustices and the authorities of the powerful. In another later myth, Prometheus would become not only the benefactor of the human race, but the very creator himself. Greek scholar Apollodorus of Athens believed that after the events of the Titanomachy, Prometheus also moulded men out of the water and the earth. Others believe that the creation of mankind came from a cooperative effort by Prometheus and Athena, he who made him out of clay and she who breathed life into them. In a story known as the Deluge, we learn that the very first people, whether constructed by Prometheus or not, were wiped out entirely by a great flood that had been sent by Zeus. Many will see the link here to Christianity, whereby the Christian god floods the earth after warning Noah and his family to build a raft to escape. Similarly, in this tale, there are two survivors of Zeus's watery purge, and those are Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, and his wife Pyrrha, the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. It would appear that Prometheus, who had foreseen the flood coming, was able to prepare for the world's destruction, and placed both Deucalion and Pyrrha into a wooden chest, which floated to the surface. It would appear that once more, Prometheus had defied Zeus in ensuring humanity's survival, but Zeus does not appear to object on this occasion, perhaps because Deucalion and Pyrrha were pious, good people. The two lone survivors made their way to an old temple once the flood had cleared, and there they would be told by a mysterious voice to collect the stones around them and throw them over their shoulders. In doing this, the stones began to transform into people, or stone people at least. This race of stone people were a hardened, versatile bunch, and to be honest, they probably would have needed to have been, given that they would be responsible for the repairing of the desolation left behind after the flood. Prometheus is perhaps one of the most fascinating titans, if not one of the most fascinating characters within Greek mythology. For one, unlike his fellow titans, his character is far more fleshed out and celebrated. Not only does Prometheus maintain a pivotal role within Greek mythology, but he has also traversed into other works of literature, such as Prometheus Bound by ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus, and a famous poem titled Prometheus by the English poet Lord Byron. It's easy to see why Prometheus became so popular, not just amongst us, but amongst the ancient Greeks, who would have appreciated Prometheus's rebellious nature as something virtuous. As mentioned earlier, the fact that Prometheus defies Zeus at all can certainly be interpreted as a metaphor for the defying of power, or the rebellion against an unfair or unjust system. Prometheus here not only becomes the benefactor of man, but also a symbol of true bravery and righteousness, in that he stands up for what he believes in and never compromises on his ideals, even though he endures agonizing torture. Some have even made the comparison of Prometheus to one such as Jesus Christ, who you might say put his own life on the line for the sake of mankind, or mankind's sins in this instance. He's also one of the most compassionate figures in Greek mythology, in his desire to keep man safe and spare man of suffering, despite this being the very cause of his pain. We also see this very same compassion when the princess Io, who Zeus had changed into a bull so as to keep her hidden from his jealous wife Hera, stumbles upon Prometheus in her exile. Having been cursed thereafter by Hera to be tormented by a gadfly, Prometheus offers the princess his sympathy, in spite of the fact that the eagle is still chewing upon his liver. In a way, the two characters have a lot in common, in that they are both tormented by a creature sent upon them by the gods. But Prometheus' ability to put aside his own discomfort to bring relief to Io is without a doubt commendable, and a true example of compassion. As Lord Byron tells us in his poem Prometheus, "Thy godlike crime was to be kind, to render with thy precepts less, the sum of human wretchedness, and strengthen man with his own mind, and, baffled as thou wert from high, still in thy patient energy, in the endurance and repulse of thine impenetrable spirit, which earth and heaven could not convulse, a mighty lesson we inherit." Some might also argue that Prometheus is somewhat arrogant, in that he chooses to defy Zeus at all, especially after seeing firsthand what he had done to his brothers Atlas and Menoetius. But I think it is less to do with arrogance and more to do with Prometheus' inability to put aside his good intentions and his love for man. You might say that he becomes so focused on ensuring mankind's survival that he becomes blind to the perils that he will face at the hands of Zeus, much as you might say we become blind to the obvious pitfalls when we are too preoccupied or fixated on something or someone. However, I think Prometheus' defiance of Zeus is far more deliberate, not only because he wants what is best for mankind, but because he wants what is fair. He repeatedly irks Zeus and questions his tyranny through his actions, all the way up until he finally provokes Zeus' anger and suffers the consequences. We also cannot forget Prometheus' wily intelligence. Not only does he figure out a way to give man the advantage, even after his brother had given the animals all of the traits that would make them physically superior, he finds a way to sneak into Olympus and breach the workshop of Hephaestus, without him even knowing. From there he is able to not only steal the fire by ingeniously hiding it in a fennel stalk that was hollow, but he's also able to sneak it out without anyone realizing. You might also say that Prometheus' intelligence was on par, if not more advanced than Zeus, in that he's able to trick Zeus in the way that he does. Furthermore, he's able to foresee all of Zeus' attempts at deception, such as where he tells his brother Epimetheus not to accept anything from Zeus, because he knew it would be deleterious for them. Unfortunately, Epimetheus was not so smart. The ancient Greeks would have seen Prometheus as an inspiration, not just for the common man, but for the future revolutionaries. After all, what better figure to be inspired by than one who stood against the father of gods? Much like Prometheus stood up to those bigger than him, it would surely cultivate the belief that man could rise up against his oppressors, and that everyone should stand up for what they believe in. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to leave it a like, don't forget to hit the join button, and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.